Welcome to the family, son.
At the beginning of this year, I played through one of the scariest, disturbing, and most atmospheric games I've ever experienced. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Being the third Resi game I've jumped into, I had an expectation of what was to come, but nothing could have prepared me for even just the opening few minutes. Taking your first few steps into the Baker household is a feeling I might never forget. The claustrophobic corridors, the sheer emptiness, the pin-drop silence save for the creaking of old beams and the whistling of the wind. Even with the knowledge on a second playthrough that it's not until you find Mia about 25 minutes in before you even encounter any of the Baker family, I don't think I will ever feel it easy exploring that first area. In the back of my mind, I will always have this unsettling feeling that someone or something is watching me from the shadows. Biohazard's story is one worth experiencing for yourself rather than listening to me trying to summarize it now in order to set the stage for today's video. But suffice it to say, regardless of the potential psychological trauma that Marguerite Baker has now left me with, seeing the credits roll gave me such a sense of relief and accomplishment that I was left craving more. And this is when Resident Evil Village stepped up to bat and knocked it out of the park.
Gifts we gave, but more you took, she snarled. So more in turn is due. In a blink, the girl was trapped inside a mirror.
Whilst being the 7th main entry in the franchise, Biohazard's plot was kind of its own thing, separate to the events of the previous titles, albeit with small nods and connections sprinkled throughout. Resident Evil Village continues the story from Biohazard, with the player once again taking control of Ethan Winters, the man who really just can't shut up when the situation calls for it.
Don't screw with me!
Wait, please. If you take it, then the others will laugh at me. But if I do better than them...
What do I care? Bitch, get out the road!
Wait, just a little longer, please.
What's so funny?
Bitch, get out the road! You're stupid. You talk too much. It's all over.
After Chris Redfield shows up looking like an absolute Chad, completely retconning the questionable redesign in Biohazard, and absolutely pasting Mia with bullets while showing no remorse, Ethan and his baby daughter Rose are taken by Chris and his team. Waking up in the dead of night to the crashed transport he was placed in, Ethan and the player must now do whatever it takes to rescue his missing daughter. Straight off the vampire bat, this game looks fantastic. Capcom's RE engine continues to pump out incredible looking environments with details etched into the smallest crevices. Village makes great use of this technology paired with its art direction in its variety of locales, ranging from the gorgeous interiors of Castle Dimitrescu and House Beneviento, the dankness of Moreau's domain, the industrial nightmare that is Heisenberg's stronghold, and of course the titular village itself. Considering the supernatural and larger-than-life antagonists that you face in this game, the design of the village could have easily taken on a more extravagant layout with grandiose architecture, but I love that the devs embraced a very real-looking European setting. The twisting alleyways, uneven terrain, and tight spaces create such a convincing depiction of a small town that you could have told me it's a perfect recreation of a real-life location from the English countryside. This just makes it all the more terrifying as each hesitant footsteps paints a very bloody picture. And suddenly something so typically innocent has now become a truly haunting place to be. Look, all I'm saying is, If I saw an unknown entity dragging the bloodied corpse of a horse away, then I'm taking more than a brisk walk in the other direction. Actually, you know what? I lie. I'm okay with killer werewolves. Give me a gun and some ammo and...
I could do this all day.
But when I came across that, I'm not just leaving the village, I'm booking a one-way flight off-world and nuking the site from orbit. Anyway, Resident Evil games aren't just made to be a visual showcase for Capcom. First and foremost, they should provide a gripping survival horror experience. And I think Village nailed it. Now, what I will say is that Village didn't consistently scare me as much as Biohazard did from start to finish. Being slower paced in comparison, it needed to fill the gaps with its nail-biting tension. As I roamed the Baker estate, I knew that Jack, Marguerite and Lucas would be looking for me, and so it wasn't that every room would hold a scare, but that any room could. In comparison, Village does not wait around to throw you into the deep end as you fend off waves of lichens that, while scary when they catch you off guard, become a very common sight by the time you reach the end credits. People often make comparisons to Resident Evil 4, and for good reason. Village is unashamedly the more action-focused between itself and its predecessor. Ammo is more commonly found, combat encounters are frequent, and the introduction of Duke the Vendor only further cements this ideology. This, however, does not equate to the notion that Village isn't a survival horror game, because no matter how packed out my arsenal was, I still shit my pants on many occasions. Combat is the most notable difference between Village and its predecessor. Not in mechanics, but in scope and frequency. Think of Alien vs Aliens in this aspect. Biohazard rarely threw more than 3 slow-moving moulded enemies at once at the player, and instead utilised the tension of the hide-and-seek sequences with the Baker family members for its high adrenaline moments. Village, however, flips this on its head, and kits Ethan out with enough firearms and ammunition to overthrow the dictatorship of a small country. It's certainly a fresh change of pace, and while some purists may prefer the slower pace and survival horror aspects, by the end of the game it felt great to be able to throw caution to the wind and unleash the firepower of the full arsenal. In particular, and please skip to this time frame if you don't want a later element of the game spoiled for you, this section playing as Chris Redfield got me so hyped that the first time I shot a Lycan with his SMG and its head turned to mush in seconds, well, let's just say I went from this to this.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not here to talk about Chris. Though seriously, I could talk for hours on this section alone. Are you kidding me? Look at this. Anyway, Ethan is still a fun protagonist to play as, and by the time the credits rolled, I truly had come to respect his determination and dedication to saving Rose. But before you can do that, you'll need to face down each of the 4 bosses standing in your way. 5 if you count the final boss, but we'll get to that. Right, Lady Dimitrescu. Do I really need to spell it out for you?
I'm supposed to think you're a nun, but I know you're really some kind of big ugly demon, so let's have it. Aha! I knew it! Big ugly demon.
Kind of sexy, though, in a weird way.
The heads at Capcom took a huge risk with the marketing for this game. Whether they anticipated or not, the internet collectively simped for the tall vampire lady once she appeared in the 3rd trailer for the game. And they simped hard. From the moment this trailer dropped, she and her daughters were at the forefront of marketing, to the point that many assumed she was the final boss of the entire game. No one really knew that she was actually one of 4 mini-bosses. And spoiler, the first one you kill too. And if I'm honest, I think Capcom absolutely did the right thing by highlighting her as the star of the show, because it meant that the remaining 60% of the game was totally unexpected, or at least it was for me. Of course, you can argue that perhaps they created a false impression to many on the true plot of the game, but in retrospect, I don't really know how they could have stretched out her gameplay sections for a full 12-hour experience. That being said, Lady D and her daughters are perfect for the cheesier moments that each game in the franchise is known for having. And whilst it's hard to be scared running away from these unconventionally attractive looking characters, Castle Dimitrescu still provides a nerving atmosphere when exploring, especially when you make your way down to the dungeons. This section is probably the closest feeling to playing Biohazard, in the vein of wandering corridors until an unkillable figure appears and you need to run and hide to then continue exploring and solving puzzles. I'm going to try not to spoil much of the fights for any of the bosses, but safe to say the final form of Lady D probably turned the stomach of one or two of her more, let's say, devout admirers. House Beneviento was one of the most terrifying and unsettling experiences I've ever had in gaming, and I played Cyberpunk 2077 at launch. Writing on Games made a really fantastic video around this particular area of the game, which I'll link below, so definitely go and check it out if you're looking for a much more cohesive and composed discussion than
What the fuck?
So, to briefly cover the Nightmare Fuel from start to finish, you enter a forest, covered in a dense fog, and oh look, there's a bunch of dolls hanging from branches. Totally normal, what's the worry? It's all good. Walk across a rickety bridge that's falling apart. Begin to experience hallucinations of your dead wife, arrive at this creepy elevator where the power cuts out and a message just writes itself on the walls. It's all good, no problem, I'm fine. And then, you actually enter this lovely house. Huh, maybe it's actually not too bad.
I've been waiting for so long.
After an extensive puzzle section featuring a wooden doll that you must examine and dismantle so that you can eventually access a key to a nearby breaker box and restore power, Resident Evil Village then chose to rip my soul out and possibly ruin the entire idea of fatherhood in the future.
I don't know what I'm doing. Shit. Fuck me.
No word of a lie, I have never been so disturbed playing a game than I was during this section. Something about the sound design, the fact that you can never really see the full design of the creature, and so your mind is left to make up the rest. The fact a giant evil baby with the mouth of a basking shark is trying to swallow you. Capcom, what the f***? Let me tell you, the second I made it out of House Beneviento, I breathed the biggest sigh of relief you can imagine. After Ethan had spent the last hour facing his inner demons, whilst I faced the reality of new trousers, I decided to take a nice stroll through a more peaceful area of the village. If it's not clear already, I think I need to stress just how much more varied the enemy design is when compared to Biohazard. As much as I can praise the experience overall, outside of the bakers you pretty much face the molded from start to finish.
Hi, how are you?
With only small variations for certain sections. We're only halfway through Village at this point, and we've already encountered lichens, vampires, creepy killer dolls, the reason the human imagination terrifies me, and full-on werewolves. Not to mention that there are still 2 more boss fights with Moreau and Heisenberg, freaks with pneumatic tools for arms to encounter, a mini-boss in the form of a pair of angry legs with a propeller for a head, a big hairy boy and his big boy mallet, and the final fight against the supernatural Mother Miranda. The devs really put their all into the variety and visual designs for every enemy type, which kept me on my toes, constantly having to adapt to each new challenge in order to come out on top. Except when the game flipped me the bird in the final boss fight and Ethan just refused to bring out his pistol in a scripted quick-time event. So I had to sit and watch Ethan lay there whilst Miranda charged a spirit bomb like Goku and turned him into paste. When this would have finished the game and I wouldn't have to do the fight from the beginning all over again. But I digress. There's so much more I wish I could go into detail about, but in an attempt to keep some of the experience fresh for anyone who has yet to try it, I give Village a solid stamp of approval and highly recommend both it and its predecessor for anyone who wants solid survival horrors that are filled with scares, gore, and most importantly, a bloody good time. The post-credits scene for Village hinted at the continuation of 7 and 8's story into Resident Evil 9, and I can't wait to see where Capcom will go next with this story. Honestly, I'm just going to be really disappointed if Chris Redfield doesn't somehow punch through a small building or something. Hello everyone! Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed what you saw, please consider giving the video a like and hitting the subscribe button down below. It really helps me out, and I'd love to hear any comments. If you had any specific requests or any feedback, that would be tremendously appreciated. I always love to know what next I could be doing or what I could be doing better. I'm really sorry that it took so long to get this one out. If I'm honest, my original plan for this video was that I was going to have a live recording of myself as I was playing through so I could capture my actual reactions. But the problem was, once I got about halfway into the game, I had an issue with my microphone where the system overloaded and I basically lost a couple of hours worth of audio. And I think that kind of really hit my motivation in terms of getting around to, finishing this. But regardless, I still had a really good time making this video. I'm not quite sure what I'll next cover. Since finishing Village, I have actually played through and completed the new Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which I thought was honestly an amazing experience and definitely one of the strongest showcases of the PlayStation 5 and its SSD. The way that they've integrated the DualSense controller is incredible. It's a visual showcase and it's a really fun time. So if you haven't picked up already, I can't recommend that one more either. But until the next time round, which I hope to see you again soon, take care and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.